you would like to get more involved and join our chapter, please see me or one of the volunteers afterward for more information. So here you can see some QR codes on that screen to join our socials. One is a Telegram. It's just a group chat basically. The other is an Instagram. We post all of our details on Instagram, which I'm sure most of you follow because you're here. So that's awesome. Woo-hoo. So first, you guys probably all saw the video when you were coming in for our biggest conference and our next conference for Turning Point. It'll be AmFest 2024. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a weekend-long conference where you get to see a ton of amazing speakers, some of which you can see on the screen: Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump Jr., and a lot more. It's hosted with Turning Point Action, so you get the political side of it as well. For any students interested in going, we can talk to us and we can help you apply for travel stipends so you can save on flight costs. The conference is really cool. You get to network with a lot of different people and meet and listen to all of your favorite speakers.
That's Savannah now.
So now, for our amazing speaker, Riley Gaines is a leader defending women's single-sex spaces, advocating for equality and fairness, and standing up for women's safety, privacy, and equal opportunities. Woo! Gaines graduated from the University of Kentucky, where she was a 12-time All-American swimmer. Riley has made waves for speaking out after tying UPenn's Leah
Well, thank you guys. You never really know what kind of room you are going to walk into, especially in the state of California. So this means a whole lot. It really does. So thank you. Before we get into anything, I really just wanted to take a brief moment of silence for the beautiful and accomplished track athlete who recently passed away, who went to this university. Her name is Shelby Danielle. I heard about this. I saw it on the news, and it broke my heart. Again, knowing how much it takes to be able to compete and to succeed at the highest level, to which she did so well. I saw posts from her family, just really, really tragic stuff, but it looked like, based off of posts, again, that she lived just a wonderful, spirit-led life. And so just a very brief moment of silence for Shelby and her friends and family. Well, again, thank you guys, and happy Real Women's Day. Sorry, I think they forget I have swimmer lungs and can just scream really loud. Anyways, but really, happy Real Women's Day. If you didn't know, that's what today is. And a little background on the inception of this day. It was back in March of 2023, which, if you didn't know, March is Women's History Month. I will be the first person to say that months and days based off of a person's identity is stupid, quite frankly. But nonetheless, March is Women's History Month. And so I'm sitting there. I'm at my parents' house, and I come from a family of athletes. So my dad, he was a professional athlete. He played in the NFL, SEC Hall of Famer. He played football, of course. And so ESPN growing up was always on the downstairs TV at my house. And so I'm sitting on my couch, and I hear this female commentator, an ESPN journalist and reporter who I liked a lot. It's a voiceover. I hear her voice, and she's talking about the sport of swimming. And so naturally, my interest was piqued. I look up from my phone, watching the TV, and they're about to do this big Women's History Month special, this big segment. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, cool. You know, swimming's not a sport that's covered on ESPN often. Who are they going to honor? Is it Katie Ledecky? One of really the greatest of all time? Is it Alex Walsh or her sister Gretchen Walsh? Is it Kate Douglas? Some of these phenomenal female swimmers. No, ESPN did not honor a woman during their Women's History Month segment. They chose to honor a man by the name of Will Thomas. They went on to talk about how Leah had overcome so much persecution to achieve the seemingly impossible by winning a national title in the women's division. But this, of course, was not a one-off. ESPN was not the only organization that had been totally ideologically captured. I saw the White House later that month, specifically Jill Biden and Secretary of State Blinken, honor Alba Ruda, a man from Argentina, as their International Woman of Courage. We saw USA Today honor Admiral Rachel Levine, our Assistant Secretary of Health, who happens to be obese, which I just think is a bit ironic considering he's our Secretary of Health. But I digress. They nominated him as their Woman of Courage. We saw Hershey's, right, the chocolate bar company. They had a big campaign, a big initiative for Women's History Month that they called Her for She's. And who was the poster child, the poster boy of their campaign for Women's History Month? It was a man. I saw all of this happening. I could keep going. And I couldn't help but think, how can we get back to honoring real women when it's a woman's award or a woman's recognition to be had? And so I started brainstorming, and I thought to myself, October 10th, this is the 10th day of the 10th month, which in Roman numerals is denoted by XX. And if you took Biology 101, then you know that XX are also the female chromosomes. And so And so it was really right then and there of March of 2023, I decided October 10th is going to be what we will call Real Women's Day. And so I started doing some outreach, talking to some different people. Is this a good idea? Is this something that we can pull off and really make a global sensation? And what I found was yes. I found that people were desperate for this type of honesty and what they call courage, but I don't feel courageous in saying that. A resolution was introduced in the U.S. House declaring today as a national holiday. Same thing in the Senate. Governors had signed executive orders declaring this day as such. We even saw today people like J.K. Rowling posting about Real Women's Day and celebrating Real Women's Day over in Scotland. So all of that to say, it's been pretty amazing. What we've been able to do at the Riley Gaines Center, we sent out on 48 different states on college campuses across the nation these activism kits, like a baseball net and a baseball and a little speed clock gun where people who were passing by, students, could throw the baseball into the net. Someone would record the time, write it on a whiteboard, and what we have seen in all 48 states is the point that I have been saying until I'm blue in the face, that men and women are biologically different, because every campus where these activism kits, men have recorded the fastest times thrown naturally. So really, really great stuff being had there, and I'm very excited for you guys to all be here on this special day. Which, like I said, I really am grateful to walk into a room in the state of California and be well received. I certainly feel more supported in this room than I did in San Francisco a few months back. Yeah, which was my first mistake, going to San Francisco. But I went there. But really, I went there to share a very similar message as to what, I'm sharing with you guys. It was at San Francisco State University, so another college campus. It was a similar forum even, of course, like a classroom setting, so a podium at the front, there was a whiteboard behind me, seats in the audience, a door at the back. And upon delivering my message, a group of protesters rush in, they turn the lights off, the room is pitch black, they rush to the front, and I'm ambushed. Totally accosted. I'm being pushed. I'm being shoved. I'm being punched in the face by these men wearing dresses, which, fortunately for me, their punches don't hurt that bad. But nonetheless, these protesters ended up holding me for ransom for about, 4, 5-ish hours, demanding that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. You might be wondering, well, where were the police? Guys, this was San Francisco. So the police were being held for ransom with me. I'm looking at the officers, hour 3 or so in this room. Can't you do something? Actually, isn't it your job to do something? To which they literally said no. No, we can't do anything because we're not allowed to do anything, because we're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community, or else we'll lose our jobs. Again, the same community who's on the other side of this door telling these officers that they're racist pigs for protecting a white girl like me. Anyways, the dean of students ends up showing up. It's like midnight, the middle of the night, and starts negotiating with these students how much I owe each of them to be able to leave, which the price they agreed upon was $10 each, which makes me mad because I think I'm worth more than $10. But eventually, I'm able to get out of this room. But the next day, the vice president of student affairs at the university, she sent out a university-wide email, right? So to all professor, all faculty, all staff, the entire student body. And in this email, she said, "We are so proud of our brave students for handling Riley Gaines in the manner that they did. We know how deeply traumatic her presence is on this campus, and so here are some counseling resources for you all." Counseling resources provided by none other than the LGBTQ Education Center on campus. But she went on to say, take the day off of school. Just know that we see you, we hear you, we love you, and we stand with you. Nowhere in this email did it condemn violence against women for that matter. Nowhere in this email did it say that we uphold our First Amendment rights and the freedom of speech. No, of course not. So when I say I'm excited to be in this room, please know a little bit about me, just very briefly. I graduated from the University of Kentucky in 2022, where I got my degree in human health sciences and health law. I was in dental school after college, set to actually pursue endodontics, which is root canals, weirdly enough. It would have been really easy for me, really safe, really secure, for me to essentially ride off into the sunset. I had been awarded tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship funds. I scored in the top percentile nationally of the DAT, which is the miserable 4-ish hour-long test to get into dental school. I could have gone anywhere in the country that I wanted to go. And it would have been really easy to do that, to follow the plans that I had made for myself. But I realized that the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself, because he very clearly had different plans for me. A little bit about my swimming, my athletic career. Started swimming when I was 4, graduated at 22, so dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport, which I probably don't have to explain that to you all. I actually got to talk to some of you who are athletes, of course, parents of athletes, those of you who were former athletes. You know what this is like. You know the time, you know the hours, you know the dedication, the sacrifices that you have to make to, again, compete and be successful at that level. I was no different. High school rolls around. I start getting recruited for college. I was one of the top recruits in the nation, so, again, really could have gone anywhere that I wanted to go to pursue my athletic dreams. I'm biased. The SEC is the best conference. Feel free to join. I guess we're letting everyone in nowadays. Texas, Oklahoma, feel free. But I knew that's where I was going to go. Like I said, my dad played football in the SEC. My mom, she played softball. My oldest sister, she went to Ole Miss, played softball. My brother, he plays football. He's in college now. My youngest sister, she's 15. She is an elite level gymnast, and she will go on to do incredible things. So I ended up committing to the University of Kentucky, which I thought I was going to be a Florida Gator, to be honest with you. As a Tennessean, I thought the only things that came from Kentucky were like meth and Mountain Dew, which I was interested in neither of those things. I'm still interested in neither of those things. But there really could not have been a better place for me. And I very proudly finished my career at Kentucky as a 12-time NCAA All-American, 5-time SEC champion, actually the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time, 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. The list goes on, but again, just to highlight, it really is a lifelong journey. We'll flash forward. We dealt with COVID in my college career. It hit in March of 2020, of course. I know you all remember, which was the end of my sophomore year, about 3 days before we were supposed to leave for our national championships. And we were robbed of an NCAA championships because we all got sent home. We came back junior year when we were eventually able to return to campus. We dealt with the autocratic mandates of social distancing and contact tracing and the mandatory mask and the vaccine mandates, which how many of you have seen a swimmer in the water wearing a mask? No, but they certainly tried. We essentially waterboarded ourselves every day. But my junior year, this is ultimately when I won my first individual SEC title. University of Kentucky won its first ever SEC title as a program in school history. And I concluded my junior season by placing 7th in the country, which I was proud of. To be top 8, you're an All-American, it's a pretty high honor. But I didn't go my best time, and so I knew I was capable of more. And so it was really right then and there, my junior year, where I placed 7th in the nation, that I set a goal for my senior year to win a national title, which would, of course, mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. And so, senior year rolls around, and I'm right on pace to achieve my goal. About midway through my senior season, I was ranked 3rd in the nation in the 200 free, trailing the girl in 2nd. Actually, she went to Cal Berkeley, which now she has transferred to University of Florida. Just saying, I wonder why. But I was trailing her by a few 100ths of a second, and I knew her very well. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. Not me, not my teammates, not my coaches, none of us. And this is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Leah Thomas. Lots of red flags at the time. Keep in mind, I hadn't seen a photo of this person, or else things probably would have been a little more clear. But for all I knew at the time, this was a senior from University of Pennsylvania, which is not a school that has ever historically produced that caliber of swimmer, leading the nation again by body lengths in events ranging from the 100 freestyle, which is a sprint, all the freestyle events in between through the mile, which is long distance. None of it made sense. I'm scratching my head. I'm looking up the name Leah Thomas. There's no history of this person until that season. And we really continued to stay in the dark until an article came out disclosing that Leah Thomas is actually Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at UPenn before deciding to switch to the women's team. And so, when I read this, I was shocked, of course. We were all shocked. But really, upon reading it, it was like this overwhelming sense of relief. Like, oh, duh, that makes sense. He's a man. And it was at that point I went to look up Will Thomas in this same database. I was curious, was this a lateral movement? Was this someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw. We saw that this was a mediocre man. That's actually probably generous. We saw that this was a less than average man competing in his rightful category, the men's category, the 3 years prior, ranking in the 400s and 500s nationally the year before. To again, now not just number 1, totally dominating the entire country of women and girls. But again, that's why I say I felt relieved, because I thought the NCAA would see it how I saw it, and how my coaches saw it, how my teammates saw it, how my family saw it, how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this information. Nothing hateful about it, nothing even opinionated about it. The mere facts on the paper in front of us, but lo and behold, the NCAA did not see it that way. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. And so about 3 weeks or so before our national championships in March of 2022, they announced that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable, meaning there was nothing we could do. No questions we could ask, no concerns that we could raise. We were quite literally told we had to accept this with a smile on our face. And so I watched that first day. The first day was the 500 freestyle, which is not an event that I typically do. And so I watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title, beating out Olympians, beating out American record holders. Girls we just saw win Olympic medals a few weeks ago. Right? These aren't scrubs. They're the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers this world has ever seen. And he beat them all by body lengths. He became the first man to win a Division I NCAA women's title. Trailblazer. But the second day of competition was the 200 free, which is the event that he and I race each other in. And so, of course, we get on the blocks and we dive off and we swim 8 laps of freestyle, and I touch the wall at the end. And I look up at the scoreboard, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, meaning that we had tied, which, number one, is incredibly embarrassing for a 6'4" man. He couldn't even beat me. But two, it's rare, right? You're racing for a minute and 40-ish seconds, and not even 1/100th of a second separated us, which you can't tell me that's not divine intervention. But anyways, we get out of the water, and we go behind the awards podium where the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself, again, him towering over me, and this official says, hey, great job, you two, but you tied, and we don't really account for ties. We only have one trophy, and so we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one. Having just competed, I mean, my heart rate was still high. My adrenaline was still pumping, and so the first thing that I thought ended up being the first thing that I said, and the first thought that I had was, isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? What do you mean you're going to give the trophy to the man in the women's 200 free? I asked the dreaded question of why, the question no one dared ask all season, at least not out loud, to which they didn't have an answer. They weren't given a script of what to say when someone asked the question of why. And so I actually appreciate his honesty and understand this is when his face changed, the officials. He sounded sad. He looked sad. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But he looked at me and he said, Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. You don't get a trophy. Leah takes the trophy home. End of story. And let me tell you what, that was the moment when we knew all season. We knew the unfair competition was wrong. We knew the locker room scene was wrong. We knew the silencing that we were facing from our universities. We knew all of that was wrong. But it wasn't until this moment, I really realized what was happening. He had reduced everything we worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. That's when I was no longer willing to wait. And I say wait because, that's what I was doing. I was waiting for someone else to say something because I thought someone else would. I thought surely a coach, surely someone within the NCAA, someone with political power, some other swimmer, someone's dad, quite frankly, would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms like my dad so desperately wanted to do. But it was in that moment, on that podium, sharing my placement, my podium spot, with a man at least 8 inches taller than me, holding this trophy I know I have to give back. And I so distinctly remember thinking to myself, Riley, how in the world can you expect someone to stand up for you if you won't even stand up for yourself? This has to come from you all as women, as female athletes. So that's kind of the unfairness of it, which, again, I don't have to describe because kindergartners understand it. But the locker room scene, if I had to see it, you guys at least have to hear about it. We were not forewarned that we would be sharing this changing space. There was no prior acknowledgement. There was no way that we could have made other arrangements for ourselves if this was something that we were uncomfortable with. And I'll kind of set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty, right? Your racing suits that you're putting on, they're paper thin, they're skin tight. It takes at least 20 minutes to poke and prod yourself into these suits. And that's 20 minutes of which you're fully exposed. I've got my back turned, again, putting on my suit. Locker room, it's a place of buzzing and chatter. This is the one meet all year. You get to see your friends from all over the country. And so a pretty loud environment. Putting my suit on, and all of a sudden the locker room goes dead silent. And, kind of stiffen up. And then I hear a man's voice in that locker room. Instinctually, we cover ourselves, whether it's with our hand or our clothes or our towels. And I swiftly turn my head around. I have to look up because, again, he's towering over every girl in the changing space. And there's a man standing at 6'4", 22 years old, fully undressing to nothing, fully intact, and exposing himself inches away from where we were simultaneously fully undressed. I mean, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable, it's humiliating. I think the best way to describe how we felt, the overall general consensus of how we all felt, I mean, it was an utter violation. It was feelings of betrayal. I loved my university. I loved and trusted the NCAA. I mean, these were organizations and institutions that I dedicated my life to. I believed they had my best interests. But without even a blink of an eye, without even bare minimum forewarning us, they threw our rights to privacy entirely out of the window. And I briefly alluded to the silencing, but again, I think it's an important piece in understanding how this issue has transcended beyond the subject matter, and it really has become an infringement on our First Amendment rights and free speech, even if it's in the form of self-censorship. I mean, my university, I had to go to sensitivity training, which it didn't really work, but I had to go, where my university brought in an outside professional, whatever that means, who sat me down, a 21-year-old senior in college at the time, and taught me how to use she, her pronouns. I had to keep going through this training until they felt like I had been re-educated to their standard, literally the verbiage that they used. We were told you'll lose all your friends if you speak up about this. You'll never get a job. Your employer is going to look you up and they're going to see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that. You know, Riley, you want to go to dental school. Well, guess what? No dental school will ever, they won't even look at your application if you speak up about this. Remember, Riley, you willingly signed that scholarship. And when you signed that scholarship, you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. Remember who you represent. Remember whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not yours. It's ours. And understand, we have already taken your stance for you. Our universities, that's not unique, by the way. Our universities went as far as to tell us that if we did choose to say something, and any harm whatsoever were to come towards Thomas's way, whether it was in the form of physical harm, emotional harm, self-inflicted for that matter, they said, then understand that would make you solely responsible, and that would make you responsible for a potential death, and that would make you a murderer. And you don't want to be a murderer, do you? No, so I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive. Let that really sink in, what they were telling us. They told us we would have blood on our hands if we advocated for fair play and privacy in areas of undressing. But believe it or not, that's effective. It works when you're talking to a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old girls, telling them they're going to be murderers. I could spend the rest of my allotted time, truly, describing the different tactics and intimidation factors they use to muzzle us, to keep us quiet, and to get us to comply with what was happening. All of that was just mentioned in regards to, again, the unfairness, in regards to the locker room, in regards to the free speech aspect of it. Understand now, as of August 1st, that's not just allowed, it's required. That treatment we face, it's required because the federal government, the people in the White House right now, actually, I'm not even sure if we have a president anymore. But I saw the cabinet meeting a few weeks ago where Jill Biden was leading it. Like, oh, cool, we have a woman president now. That's neat. All of that, as of August 1st, the Biden-Harris administration, they have taken Title IX, which was at one point a federal civil rights law that prevented sex-based discrimination within any educational program that receives federal funding. But again, I say at one point because Title IX has been abolished under this administration. They've taken this policy and its original implementation 52 years ago. It was only 37 words, very brief, a paragraph, created a new proposal that's now almost 500,000 words, 1,577 pages from 37 words. That should tell you everything that you need to know. But in short, what they've done is equate sex with gender identity, meaning these words are synonymous, they're interchangeable, they mean the same thing, which the implications of this, of course, are severe and they're harmful. It means now that men can take academic and athletic scholarships from women. It means men have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces, whichever one they see fit. Women's today, men's tomorrow, by all means. It means dorm rooms. You're a 17-year-old girl, you go off to college for the first time away from your family, and you get randomly assigned a roommate. You could be assigned a male who merely says he is a woman, and if you even dare go to your administration and request a new roommate, that's it. Under this new rewrite, you would be guilty and charged with sexual harassment. Not the man parading around your locker room. No, to President Biden, that's considered brave and inspiring. He said it many times. He said, these are the most brave and inspiring people I've ever met. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment. Again, your speech is compelled. You would be forced to use biologically incorrect but preferred pronouns as a student, as a coach at a university, as a professor. The list goes on. Even men, we talk a lot about how this affects women, but this new rewrite, it adversely affects men too, because now due process is no more. So if you're a man who has been accused of some sort of sexual misconduct, you don't even have the opportunity to defend yourself anymore, which is again, it harms men more adversely. The premise of this debate, a lot of the cultural chaos that's plaguing this country, and why this matters to me is because we're denying biblical truth and we're denying objective truth, biological reality, a truth we have never struggled to understand in the nearly 250 years we've been established as a country, and certainly much longer than that, that truth being man and woman. The sheer essence of humanity. Hate to break it to every single person in this room, never mind every single person on this planet. You're all here from man and woman, and we're being asked to deny that. That's as if we're being asked to deny that the sky is blue. Or better yet, don't even just deny that it's blue, say that it's purple. Or else. Which, if you've read 1984, and don't lie and say you read it out of your own free will, we all had to read it for school, then the whole 2 + 2 = 5 mantra, it's real, and it's a slippery slope. And it's a slippery slope that by the hands and feet of our own leaders, we are actively being led down. I could list 100, more than, stories that are, the same as mine, virtually the same. They all have the same storyline. Mediocre man turns into a record-smashing woman. I could list hundreds of those. But I want to spend, again, the rest of my time telling you why I feel encouraged and why you should feel encouraged as well. Now 25 states have passed some sort of fairness in women's sports law, which is remarkable considering you're clapping a little prematurely because California has not, which should not come as a shock to literally anyone. Don't even get me started on State Senator Scott Wiener. Don't even get me started on that guy. Anyways, we have seen 9 states now pass some sort of legislation codifying and defining the word woman in law. Again, I can't even believe we have to do that, but shouldn't be too surprised. We have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even answer the question of what is a woman because she claims she's not a biologist. which guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So not only is it necessary, I would argue that it's urgent that we define this word woman. We've seen 26 states now ultimately sue the Department of Education and the Biden administration over this illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX. And yes, I said illegal because they didn't do this legally. He didn't go through Congress. He didn't do any of his necessary executive means to make sure this is done. No, he did this with a stroke of a pen. And so 26 states have sued, and 26 states have at least temporarily won. The Supreme Court has upheld the injunctions that have been issued, which is, again, great news. California is not one of those states. Even just recently, a really large portion of why I feel encouraged. In the Mountain West Conference, in the sport of women's volleyball, there is a team, San Jose State University, right here, close to here actually, that has allowed a man onto their women's team, taking a scholarship, taking a roster spot, taking a travel spot when the team travels from a hardworking, deserving female who signed a scholarship to be able to play. But 4 universities in the conference have decided ultimately to forfeit their match against San Jose State University, which Southern Utah first, then Boise State, then University of Wyoming, most recently Utah State. I can tell you all confidentially that there are more states you can expect more universities next week that you can expect to also forfeit their match. And in the school statements that they release, of course, they're very bland. You know, we have decided to forfeit this match. Our schedule will resume as soon as whatever the next game is. Not citing any specific reasons, but I can tell you the reasons because I've talked with the girls on the teams. The reason they're not playing San Jose State University is because they're fearful. They're scared for their safety. They cite safety concerns. They say, look, we've seen him give other girls on opposing teams career-ending concussions, and we don't want to be on the receiving end of that. We know that if we forfeit, we're going to take a loss, which is oftentimes detrimental in conference play. But that's a loss that we're willing to take because we understand that our safety and well-being matters more than any victory. And so I applaud them. I commend them. It's tragic that we have to. I am the biggest proponent for girls playing in sports. But it takes immense courage and leadership to do what they have done. Certainly, they have displayed more courage and leadership than their coaches, than their presidents of their universities, than their athletic directors. So nonetheless, that is the most effective way to say enough is enough. And speaking of the safety concern, which is often something I forget about because in swimming we're not throwing elbows at each other, but in sports where there is physical contact, like volleyball, where you're colliding or throwing something at one another or whatever it may be, we've seen girls now who, let's take a high school senior in North Carolina. Peyton McNabb is her name. Playing on a volleyball team, a women's team. The opposing team had a man on it. He jumps up, he spikes the ball, it hits her in the face. Immediately she's knocked unconscious, where she laid for many minutes before finally coming back around. Still to this day, this was over 2 years ago. She's partially paralyzed on her right side. Her vision is impaired. Her memory is impaired. She has to have special accommodations for testing at school because she can't retain information like she once could. She was supposed to play softball in college. Now she's not. High school field hockey player in Massachusetts. A man is on the team. He slaps a shot. It hits her in the face. All of her teeth are knocked out. She had to undergo facial reconstruction surgery to quite literally put her face back together, reconstruct her smile and her jaw, which again seems to be a increasingly common experience. Bottom line, and to really put a bow on it, is that this issue should not be a partisan issue. It shouldn't even be a political issue. It was inevitable that it became one, and it's certainly an issue that both sides are using as this political pawn. How can they achieve what they want to achieve? But it's not a political issue. This is a humanitarian issue. But like I said, it has become one. We saw in the U.S. House, right, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act was introduced. And we saw 219 Republicans vote in favor of protecting women and girls in sports, and all 203, every single last one of them, mothers and fathers of their own young daughters, all 203 Democrats that voted in opposition of protecting women and girls in sports. We saw it just 2 weeks ago. Representative Mace, Nancy Mace, introduced a bill, Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act, which would just ensure the deportation of anyone who is in this country illegally, who is either a pedophile, a rapist, or who has murdered a woman or a child. Seems pretty like something we should all be able to get behind because, one, they're here illegally anyways. Let's definitely get the ones who are doing bad things out of this country. But 158 House Democrats voted in opposition of this bill. But how can this be? They're the party of and for women, right? No, it doesn't seem very pro-woman to me to let 16,000 known rapists into this country. That doesn't seem very pro-woman to me. I get called brave all the time, which is quite literally the funniest thing in the world to me, because I'm saying nothing profound. I'm saying nothing overly wise. I'm saying there are two sexes, and you can't change your sex, and that each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, of privacy, and of safety. Now, you know who's brave? It's your campus officers here who have done a phenomenal job, so I think we should applaud them. It's your wonderful DA and his team that are here. It's our military members. It's first responders. That's what's brave, not me. But nonetheless, I understand the risk and the threats that you face for saying something as simple as what I've said. But anyways, I appreciate you guys. Super excited for the opportunity to answer a few questions if you guys have any. Don't know if there's a process for this. But again, very appreciative of you guys, so thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Alrighty. Wait, okay.
You got the microphone.
Okay, so we're going to open Q&A. So if anybody has a question, you can line up over here. Auditoriums are rough to coordinate mic movement, so if you want to come over, line up here. Just a gentle reminder, this is a question and answer session, and that typically means that you ask a question and then Riley gets an answer. So if we could just... So please keep the monologues to a minimum. And then, yeah, perfect.
Hello, I just want to say thank you so much, first of all, for coming out and speaking here for us. I know this is something that, a lot of people understand the struggle, and they, either there's people who see it and they're like, this is crazy, or, women who are actually in the sports and they've personally been affected by it.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure everyone here wants to know, what can we do going forward to help, support this movement and to help this become more widespread?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's super cool you asked that as a man, to be honest, because we see so many men. Yeah, let's cut that mic, maybe. We can all scream. Yeah. We see a lot of men who look at what's happening and almost kind of, their initial reaction is to laugh, and understandably so, because this is like a South Park episode, or like a Babylon Bee headline, or like an SNL skit, which is objectively meant to be funny. And men kind of laugh, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is absurd. I can't believe you all have to deal with that. But not really my problem, not really affecting me. So I think it's super cool you asked that as a man, because this isn't something that it should be only women pushing back on. We really do need every single person, regardless of any identity factor. But what we can do sounds pretty cliche, but not shy away from the conversation. what I have seen in these past 2 or so years that I have since I've taken that initial leap of faith, I at first was super hesitant. I wanted to make sure the people I was around kind of agreed with me before I felt confident or secure enough to say what I was feeling. I would do that at first, walking on eggshells. And what I found was most of the time, people did feel the same way as me. And I saw pretty early on that courage begets courage. And so by me being willing to say something, other people felt more willing to say something. And so if we can carry that out into our own circles of influence, which we all have them, I think that's another misconception is people believe, I don't have a big platform, I don't have a large following on social media, there's nothing I can do. You don't need that to be effective. Everyone has people in their life around them who, again, whether they agree or disagree, people we can persuade and let them know what's happening. So I think talking about it, posting about it, all really, really important stuff, and ultimately shifting public perception, which is very powerful. We have seen corporations, we have seen entities like the NCAA, our government, the media, they respond to how we respond. Take Bud Light, for example. They lost $27 billion essentially overnight because they thought it would be a good idea to put someone dressed as Audrey Hepburn in a bathtub drinking a beer. Don't know who they were trying to appeal to, but their marketing director needed to be fired yesterday. But their next commercial was a big burly man on a motorcycle with a camo can. So they listen to the people. The free market, it prevails 100% of the time. So we really do have the power to make real influence.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just have one more kind of following question. So I remember you saying, you had to, if no one else was going to stand up, you had to stand up for yourself, because if you couldn't do it for yourself, no one else would. How do you think, how did you go through that process of, being able to actually stand up for yourself? How do you stand up for yourself?
Answering this pretty personally, first and foremost, to me, I'm able to do what I do with a smile on my face and an incredibly light heart because I have a strong faith. And so because I know that the battle has already been won, knowing that there's an audience of one and nothing of this world matters, I can take it on the chin pretty easy. It wasn't always that easy. Again, it definitely took some kind of getting used to and being able to take the arrows. Now I can do it with ease. So that, number one. I would say, two, get people around you in your life who support you. Doesn't mean they necessarily have to agree with you. That's not what I'm saying, is surround yourself with people who agree with you. No, I have lots of friends who disagree with me, but they know me. And they know my heart, and they know I don't come, and I never have come to anything with hatred in my heart. That's just not who I am. And so having those people in my life, people like my husband, my family, my friends, my spiritual leaders, my youth pastor at church, they've all been able to pretty constantly lift me up. And they make it easy. And just realizing a lot of the backlash that you're probably going to face for saying, again, you will face it. I'm not going to sit here and say you won't. The backlash that you face for saying something as simple as what I've said, it's merely name calling. It's people saying you're some sort of phobia or ism or, petty personal attacks. People all the time say, oh, well, your hair extensions look fake. I'm like, this is my real hair. So I think that's a compliment, honestly. That's pretty much the extent of the backlash that you'll face. And once you realize that's what we do in second grade is call each other names, it's pretty easy for me to take it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate all the hard work you do.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. I just spoke at a high school in Utah, which is a little bit of a different political climate in Utah, but just yesterday, this week. And so absolutely, I believe it's incredibly important it's what the other side is doing. They're teaching kids young, therefore I believe we should too. Of course, tailoring the message in a way where it's not as crude and crass as what I have been tonight in describing the locker room and different things, but still hitting the points. This could happen because Title IX, it applies to high schools too. They're also forced to comply. So absolutely, I believe working in conjunction with Turning Point, the Leadership Institute, getting on high school campuses, really, really important and definitely something that matters. Because again, a lot of these high school students too, they're 17, 18 years old. They're able to vote, some of them. So because they can decide the direction of our future, they are just as entitled to this message as everyone who is here tonight. So absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Emerson. I'm probably what conservatives would call a raging liberal. I don't know if you can tell. But I am actually not affiliated with any political party because I find it is so important to find compromise. And so I might not agree with what everybody thinks in this room and vice versa, but I find it really important to kind of look at personal stories and kind of see how they interact. And as someone who does identify as non-binary, meaning that I don't affiliate with a quote-unquote gender, and I do agree with the kind of movement of becoming more comfortable, kind of accepting social stuff, but also taking into account personal stuff, like you were talking about the uncomfortableness in the locker room, and all of that stuff. And I was wondering if this, as you say, Leah, because she went under these hormones, and according to the NCAA, she was under those strict guidelines and showed she had gone through the process. And so would you be willing to compete against those people, but having a different locker room set up to kind of change this kind of
Well, one, I think it's awesome that you're here. It's super cool that you're here, really. So I appreciate it a whole lot. To answer your question, you described these guidelines that are in place as strict. They are not strict. The NCAA had a blanket policy of maintaining a testosterone threshold of 10 nanomoles per liter. The average woman has less than 1 nanomoles per liter of testosterone. So that's still 10 times, at least, the amount of testosterone that a woman has. That being said, women are not a testosterone threshold. That is not what makes us beings. We are not inferior or men with some sort of handicap. That's not what we as women are. So there's no testosterone threshold. Even if a male possessed 0 nanomoles per liter of testosterone, even still it's unfair. And I'll explain it. There are things and advantages that males possess that testosterone has no effect on. One, for example, of course, height, limb size, certain things. If you've already gone through puberty, especially, those things are already developed, even if you mitigate any sort of testosterone production. Things like heart capacity, your lung size. It sounds silly, but even something as what most people would consider mundane as throat size. Men have on average a 40% larger throat than women. I can tell you that makes a huge difference. It's a huge contributor to success when you're playing a sport like swimming where you're gasping for air. So there's no amount of testosterone suppression or levels that would make it fair or reasonable for males to compete in women's sports because women are not a testosterone level. So
I then just do have a follow-up question because you talk about testosterone levels. You say that regardless of testosterone levels that it doesn't matter, but in Olympic settings, women have actually been denied the ability to compete as women because they have a natural higher testosterone level and not being transgender. So how do you then respond to that if you say that doesn't matter the amount of testosterone? So you're saying that if a woman has too high of testosterone, then they're not a woman?
No, because again, I'm not equating women with testosterone thresholds. I don't think that's what makes someone a woman. You're probably referring to someone like Caster Semenya, for example, which, if you all don't know, Caster Semenya is an Olympic-level runner, won many, many gold medals and things of that nature, world championships, different things. Caster Semenya is not a female. Female is a word rooted in science. Caster Semenya has a DSD, which is different than being trans, as you mentioned, but nonetheless, this is someone who was born with a Y chromosome, which females do not possess. So Caster Semenya has internal testes and still went through male puberty, still produces testosterone to that of a male level, when born, appeared to have female external genitalia, but what it really is an underdeveloped penis, to put it pretty explicitly. Therefore, Caster Semenya being a male, Caster Semenya does not belong in women's sports. I think there's a conversation to be had, including, scientists and other people who are well equipped to talk about this stuff, of what a solution looks like. But what I can tell you is males, regardless of if you're trans or someone with a DSD, males do not belong in female sports. So. Yeah, come on.
Sorry. So, and then if you talk about you want to kind of like prevent other people from going into women's sports, do you then have a solution to allow people who don't identify as male or female and have do you have a plan or solution for them so that they can feel included in like their own league, or are you just saying that nobody can touch women's sports and that's it, and I'm not going to provide a different way of going about it, because you talk about I don't want to I want to provide my stuff, but you don't provide a solution to the problem. You just say this is a problem and not providing a solution.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's up to me or women to provide a solution for men. But what I will say is I initially thought that a third category is something that could be successful and something that could work, and I believed it made sense. And then I'll tell you, I've changed my mind, because FINA, which is the international governing body of swimming, the sport of swimming, and aquatic sports, they were really the first ones to take a bold first step in prioritizing fairness over inclusion. And they created a policy right after this national championships that says, if you've gone through male puberty, you can't compete with the women. Bold first step. It insinuated in this policy that if you transition by the age of 12, then you can, which I believe is criminal to suggest that minors should be able to chemically or surgically castrate themselves. But nonetheless, it was a bold first step in prioritizing fairness. And they created a third category. And they said anyone who identifies as non-binary or as the sex that is not their own, they're able to compete in this third category. Even up to the world championship level. Not a single person has competed in this third category. Leah Thomas actually went on to sue for this rule and said it wasn't satisfactory because he is a woman and he deserves to compete with the women, which he lost the lawsuit. He said, I want to be able to compete in the women's Olympics, or if I can't trample on women in the process, I don't want to play. I don't want to swim. So then I really got to thinking, though, why would we have a third category based on an identity factor? Sports are the one place you go to abandon all identities. You don't look at religion. You don't look at color of your skin. You don't look at any identity factors. So why would we have a category based on that? That's what's awesome about sports is it's a unifying thing. Then I got to thinking, okay, if fairness and safety matter to me for everyone, including people who identify as trans, which it does to me, you would still very much in the third category have men competing against women, right? That's still what the reality would be. So then would you further break it down between have a category for females who identify as men and men who identify as women? Okay, then do you even further break it down between men who took puberty blockers before puberty and men who took puberty blockers after puberty? Because again, I believe they're entitled to safety and fairness as well. Getting enough people to play in these categories, getting enough people to watch these divisions, the resources and finances and facilities, I don't believe it's feasible. I believe sports are meant to be a unifying, beautiful I mean, it was for me. I've made so many friends. I met my husband so many. It was a wonderful thing that every single person should be a part of, even if you are gender nonconforming, but play in the category that is safe, number one, and fair, number two, and that's the category that aligns with your sex. So, thank you.
So, in your opinion, why did the NCAA permit that individual to participate? What was the motivation for them? You're much closer to it than most of all of us.
Well, to answer, quite frankly, because they're weak-kneed, spineless, morally bankrupt cowards. But what I have seen, because I thought the same thing as you. I was so confused at first because every single person I talked to, my coaches, the university presidents, athletic directors, chancellors, the president of the NCAA, every single person agreed with me. I remember the NCAA president, Mark Emmert, at the time, he released a statement following this national championship that says, word for word, and I remember because it's so comical, he said, "I unequivocally stand in my decision to allow Leah Thomas to swim with the women because it's based in evolving science." Yet publicly, that's what he said publicly, yet privately, I see him at this conference. I approach him. I ask him, how have you allowed this? And he said, "You know what, Riley, you keep pushing. You keep fighting." As if he's not the one that I'm fighting. He totally agreed with me. He said, "My hands are tied." I said, "Who's tying your hands? You're the president." He said, "Well, we don't want to lose any federal funding, and we don't want to be sued." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm going to sue you." And I am now. I decided to... What we have seen, again, whether it is, virtually in every realm, is this movement is very much driven by dollar signs. Look at what's happening in the medical community, where you have, again, which they're the real victims in this story, children who have been, mutilated, surgically and chemically. Doctors, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I remember this video from Vanderbilt Hospital got leaked, and it's this woman, she's the head of their gender health, whatever you want to call it, and she's up there and she's like, "Oh my gosh, forget abortions. We can make so much money off of this with $70,000 to $100,000 per patient. They're lifelong patients. This is a cash cow." Those doctors took an oath, the Hippocratic Oath, and first do no harm. Could you imagine going into a doctor and say, "Hey, can you cut off my right arm? I don't really want it." They would look at you like you're crazy, but that's exactly what's happening with kids, or adults for that matter, walking in and saying, "Hey, cut off my breasts," and doctors are doing it. They're violating their oath, but it's because they're profiting financially and largely from it. So all that to say, I believe money drives a lot of this movement.
And the money primarily from the federal government? I know in California, I worked for a school district for a period of time. They had to really comply with everything that the state mandated in order for them to get funding.
Yeah, that's right. Both at the state level and federal level. But what we have seen, this fear that's been instilled in people, again, take the Title IX rewrite, for example. They're threatening to withhold funds, even from things like YMCAs. Those receive federal funding. They have to comply to these rules, or else they could risk losing that. Which is why these 26 states, they're like, we're not complying with that. That violates its original intent. So yes, both at the state level, federal level, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good information.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering what kind of support you're getting from your male counterparts in the athletic world that you're in.
What we have seen, actually, men are more apt to agree, right? I think that speaks to, we've talked a lot about personality, physical differences between men and women, and how men are taller and stronger and faster and all the things. But this, I think, even speaks to how men and women are pretty intrinsically possess different characteristics, typically. Men are more dominant, men are more aggressive, men are more willing to less apologetic. Women are more emotionally driven. Women are more which makes us wonderful mothers, right? I mean, these are good things. I'm not saying this in any sort of negative light. Don't get me wrong. But men are more apt to say, yeah, this is crazy. If my daughter were facing this, or if our team were in some way threatened, we wouldn't put up with it. But even still, because it's not affecting them, it's a different approach. The support is there. I think what would be awesome to see, let's take the volleyball example, right? If you have men's basketball teams at these universities, if they step down and say, hey, dude, you're treating our fellow athletes at this university wrong, we're not going to play until you fix this. It would be over yesterday. So I think that would be awesome to see.
How fun would it be not to just jump in and swim against him if you've got the skills? That being said, not in relation to what we're doing with Olympics and what people are doing with their careers.
Exactly. No, I entirely agree with you. And if you have dinner with Michael Phelps, I'll come too. So, yeah, thank you. Come on.
You don't want to get to it.
You're good. Come on.
First, I'd like to ask for some sort of account of the purpose of sports. Like, why do you think we play sports?
Well, I think for a lot of reasons. Again, I can tell you why I played sports and how I benefit from playing sports. It taught me how to be a leader. It taught me how to be resilient. It taught me how to set goals and work to achieve those goals. All things that I'm utilizing in my life now. There was a recent Ernst & Young study that came out that said 94% of female C-level executives were female athletes. And again, I think that speaks to the importance of playing sports and how they can benefit, people beyond their athletic careers. Also, as I mentioned, it really is this unifying, it has an ability to unify us, which is always needed in today's world. Friendships, like I said, met my husband there. I think there's lots of reasons to play sports. Keeps you fit. That's a big part of, even still, I run a lot, do lots of things to keep me physically healthy, which in turn helps mental health, I believe. And no one should be denied that.
And I take it that you think the inclusion of trans people in women's categories will maybe discourage women from...
Absolutely, I do. I've talked to women who, I've talked to moms of young girls who say, my daughter doesn't want to play. She's in 5th grade and has a boy on her basketball team. She doesn't want to play sports at all. So yes, it absolutely does discourage, and I know this because I receive the messages all the time.
Seems plausible. I have another question. Sort of about your emotional motivation, right? Seeing this from a sort of very disconnected third-party perspective, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you're primarily motivated by resentment. Do you?
I don't have I don't feel resentment towards anyone, any person, anything. I have no resentment in my heart for Leah Thomas. Actually, me and my husband pray for Leah Thomas. So there's no resentment that I possess.
So can I ask your general emotional motivation?
I don't know if it's necessarily emotionally driven. I do have emotions that I possess and ways that I feel, but I don't think that's overall what drives me. I think what drives me is knowing that it's the right thing. It's pretty much really that simple. I do have a younger sister, and maybe that is an emotional pull that I have, knowing that I want her to be able to compete fairly, to achieve and to succeed, which, as I said, she's an incredible athlete, and she will do those things. So long as women's sports remain intact and the integrity is still there. Being married 2.5 years, I can only hope to have a daughter of my own one day. So maybe there is a little bit of emotion there. Knowing what's at stake, I think that's what what it boils down to. And understanding it's bigger than just women's sports. That's a large part of it. It's not just, I didn't get to hold and take home the trophy. I could care less about the tangible object of the trophy. That's not why I do what I do. I have a million of those little $5 production trophies at home. It's not the trophy. It's understanding the bigger picture here. We're seeing this now infiltrate into prisons. You know, in California, we've seen over 1,500 men apply to be women to get into women's prisons. That's just in the state of California. I've talked to female inmates. You laugh, but I've talked to female inmates who have become impregnated by men from male facilities who have been transferred over for merely saying, I'm a woman. Guess who's paying for it? You are. They're being transferred into women's prisons. They're raping these women. They're impregnating these women. I've talked to women who have female inmates who have HIV and AIDS from these male inmates where it's running rampant in male facilities. Again, they're coming over to women's prisons. They're raping these women. They have AIDS and HIV now. I've talked to a woman in California. Correctional officers in the state were paid overtime. This was on Super Bowl Sunday. They were paid overtime on Super Bowl Sunday to install in all women's facilities condom dispensers in prisons. Now, why would women's facilities need condom dispensers and dental dams? That's because they're not women's facilities. That's because there are men in these prisons. So understanding it transcends beyond, that's another reason why I feel apt and encouraged to fight the fight. But thank you for being here. We'll do these last few, and then we'll call it.
So I'm super appreciative of you coming and speaking to us, and I hold your values dear to my heart. My question is, how can we implement, what can we do in our communities to ensure that, my grandsons and my granddaughter aren't going to have to, go up against this when they're older. Just off, I feel really, I'm not going to say it's an illness. I don't know what it is, but, a friend of mine had a son who now has a daughter and made all of the changes and is now always suicidal because he made a mistake and it can't be reversed. And it's very, very sad, and she was just trying to be a good mom and be supportive, and unfortunately, there's too many stories like that out there. But, I want to ensure, I try to be as active as I can in my community, and I just want to, I don't know, how can I help my small community to ensure that this doesn't infiltrate into the sports, these little kids are coming up, and because they're teaching this kind of stuff in elementary schools.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because they don't even know what they're talking about. The kids come home and my grandson asked me, Mimi, how do I know if I'm a boy? And I was so just like, whoa. I mean, it hit me with such shock, and I said, well,
I would say,
do you have a penis? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, well, you're a boy. Go outside and play. And I because I didn't know what to say to him. And asking me this question, and I'm like, what the heck?
it's very intentional, right, that they do start this so young, because kids as young as 6 and 5, of course, they're impressionable, they're vulnerable. You don't know, and we shouldn't expect them to understand these things. They're so young. So certainly all by design, but what we have seen across the board is that these, whether it's implemented at the local level in regards to school boards making decisions, or again the state level, the federal level, whatever it is, they want to do this behind closed doors because they know this is not an issue that polls in their favor. That's why Kamala Harris has run desperately from her voting record and her stances on things pertaining to the gender ideology movement. Notice that. They haven't talked about it on any of the national debates because she's ashamed of it, because she knows it's wrong and because she knows it's not a winning issue for her. So because they know, and because it's not a winning issue, they like to do it in secrecy. They want to do it behind closed doors where no one knows, where no one sees what's happening, until, boom, it's implemented and your grandson comes home and says, how do I know if I'm a boy or a girl? So I think it's important to stay involved. I think often, and I can say this, I mean, again, speaking in personal experience, I live in the state of Tennessee where we for the most part, get it pretty right down there. And so people sit on their hands and they think that will never happen here. That would be your first mistake. because the minute you become complacent in that way or sit idly by and think it won't happen, no one is immune. So stay up to date, get involved in any way that you can. I think that's really important. And secondly, I would say it's important to reach out to your legislators. They're supposed to represent you and the people, their constituents, which I can't promise that they will read your letter, but I believe it's a big part of our civil duties in doing that, letting them know as a constituent what is frustrating you, what you need to see better, and how the community is being affected. So all things that we can do. And again, continuing to talk about it.
Hi, Riley. Thank you again for being here today. And as a woman who has played sports, what are your final messages to women and young girls like me on issues like this? What are your final messages and your final takeaway that I should take away from today?
Well, one, I would say keep playing sports. Like I said, it really does have the ability to affect the rest of your life. Did certainly mine, even, outside of this issue and how my life has been changed pretty drastically, career plans-wise. It gave me, like I said, my best friends. It gave me my husband. All the wonderful things I mentioned. Play sports, keep playing sports. Don't get discouraged. If you have to come across this, I know it's easier said than done. Don't play. Stand down. But by standing down, understand you're actually standing up, which is incredibly impactful. It's a temporary loss or a temporary setback, but knowing what you're fighting for is so much larger than just that. I would encourage you, I know easier said than done, I would encourage you to stand down, which if that's something you have to come across, we here, have wonderful resources and are able to support you in any way that we can. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much again for being here. But I love this country. I love all that we stand for. I am a huge patriot. But it's really hard to keep hope when it just keeps going down the wrong direction. So how do you hold on to your hope that this country will go back to the way it was?
I feel that sometimes, and I have to remind myself, one, again, as a Christian, the book has already been written, so we do already know the outcome, which is fantastic. We don't have a timeline, unfortunately, but we know who wins because the war has already been won, which is wonderful news for us who believe. But from a worldly perspective, how do I not lose hope? It's easy to watch the news or see on X all of these awful, chilling, grim stories of this happening all over the country, because that's how the news operates. That's what gets clicks and likes is these pretty graphic or horrible stories. But I remind myself, if I didn't have social media, if I didn't know what was if I wasn't glued to it like I admittedly am, I wouldn't think the world was that bad of a place. Right? And so I think back to other, time periods throughout this country, and I think of the 1860s, when we're literally fighting in war. I bet they would have never imagined that they would make it out of it. I think back to the 1940s, when we're fighting in World War II, or the 1930s, right just before, where we're facing the Great Depression. We're at a very fortunate spot at this point in time. There are terrible things happening, right? Like open borders, like inflation, like other things. But in the grand scheme of things, comparatively, we are blessed to live in this great nation at this point in time that we do. So, thank you.
This will be the last question.
Yes.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for everything you're doing. Appreciate it. Cal Poly, we have all gender bathrooms, and those are just kind of forced in from the top. And just today, I used the bathroom, wash my hands, and a man walks in and shoots a urinal behind me. So I'm just curious, what's your number one piece of advice? How do you fight against something like that when it's just pushed upon you?
Yeah. We, again, not a surprise here at this university that is the case. Because, again, like you said, it really is implemented from the top down. I've talked to girls in elementary school even, who, this is the same policy that's implemented at their elementary school. I've talked to girls, parents of girls really, who have held their bladder all day to the point where they have developed urinary infections because they're not willing to subject themselves to using the bathroom when a man could walk in at any point in time. So I think it's crucial that you talk to people, administrators who you do believe would look out for you and protect you. You have a wonderful DA in this room who could probably give you some pretty good advice as to what to maybe on the legal front, what really can be done. Because bottom line is, it is discriminatory practice to eliminate sex-based protections when your privacy, when your safety, or when opportunities are being violated. And in a bathroom, certainly your safety and privacy are violated. So I would encourage, I'm sure there's some people in this room who can help you on a pretty immediate level of what to do, what to expect. But reach out to it, and we'll get in touch and look into it and see what I can do. So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Can everybody hear me? Perfect. So we are going to have you guys, if you're willing, kind of scooch and pretend like we love each other, and we're going to hold up our Keep Sports Patriotic signs for our Instagram photo.